Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared create collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face.
So my next conversation is with Darlene Naponse. We talk about her new film, Falls Around Her. It premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival back in September, and I was fortunate enough to have seen it there, but we just couldn't get our schedules to land and to connect, and so I just was able to get this interview in just a couple of weeks ago. So I hope you'll stay tuned and listen in. Darlene and I had a great time, and we talked about the film. And by the way, you need to see it. It's going to be a video on demand. It's touring Canada and frankly touring the globe, from what I understand, from what Darlene's telling me. And I think we talk a little bit more about that in the interview actually itself. We talk about healing and reconciliation. This is a film about our Indigenous peoples. This is a film about our understanding and our lack of understanding, frankly, of our Indigenous past. And it's about our relationship to Mother Earth and to the land. And we talk about silence and natural sounds and urban exteriors. And we talk about storytelling as a whole, but in particular, Indigenous storytelling. We get into things like birch bark and the importance of that and just the beauty of landscapes and how we're connected to that and what it actually might mean for us. We touch on love and laughter. We touch on the imprint that mining has had in northern communities in our country, but more importantly on Indigenous communities and First Nations and Inuit communities in particular. So step into this conversation and try to set aside your Western understanding, your Western lens. Maybe you don't need to do that, but I'm going to encourage you to try to do that either way and step into this conversation with Darlene and I, and I think you'll find it quite rewarding. Don't forget, you can find out more about the work that I'm doing on davidpecklive.com. Writing and speaking, you can find out about that there. If you want to support the work I'm doing financially on Face to Face, you can do that through Patreon. We would certainly appreciate that. And if you can't do that, don't forget, you can always leave a review on Spotify. You can leave it on iTunes and Google. That would be really helpful. We would certainly appreciate that as well. And if you want to advertise on the podcast, we're starting to do that. We're starting to reach out to me through my website, and you can certainly find out more about that as well. And don't forget rabble.ca for more interviews and not only face-to-face, but many other podcasts. We've got writers and bloggers and things going on there on rabble.ca that you're going to want to find out about. Don't touch that dial. Darlene Naponse and our conversation around Falls Around Her coming right up. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We're joined by a very special guest here with us today to talk about her new film. Darlene Naponse is here to talk about Falls Around Her and a whole lot else. That's my guest. Darlene, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, miigwech. Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about the film released at the Toronto International Film Festival. And by the way, before we even begin, congratulations! I loved the film. Gorgeous cinematography, a story that clearly needs to be told and has been told, and now needs to be seen by Canadians and people everywhere. So yeah, thanks for sharing it with us, and again, congratulations.
Mm-hmm. Miigwech, yes. Now we're really proud of the film, and it was so hard and difficult to make, and just to get funded and to keep pushing that perspective and that story. And when it came together, and now that it's being seen by not just a few, but with a lot of people. So we're really happy with everything that's happening.
So tell me a little bit about that. I want to talk about the challenges for sure, but you're so Toronto, Calgary, Winnipeg. You've got a little bit of a Canadian tour of a sort with release. Probably going to be on video on demand eventually, I would think too. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we started at the Toronto International Film Festival, and we've been traveling all over the world, luckily, and through different festivals, Indigenous film festivals and international film festivals from Australia. We're going to be in Panama in a couple of weeks. Yes, and then back to Australia. And
you're really just going to
Canada.
You're really just going to Panama for the beach and the surfing, though, right? That's really
yes, exactly. Because I've never been.
Oh, that's fantastic. We were my family and I were in Panama just last year and had an amazing time. Oh, that's amazing. Nice. So you're actually traveling the world with this beautiful Canadian film.
I am, and I get to share, and it's so special too, because when we were shooting it, we were actually thinking we were shooting a spring film, and then winter came, in April, and so with our 3 snowstorms and our ice storm, we managed to create what we did, and so especially when we go into these warmer countries and share the magnificent view of the landscape, it's really wonderful to see how everybody reacts to it. They're reacting to the story, but also to the land, and so to share that landscape, and the extremities around it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful phrase. Reacting to the land. The land is very much. Can I say it's a character in the film?
Definitely, it is a character, and that was my hope in creating it, and my hope in what I do a lot of my work in, and that. So, when we think about our relationship in community and our relationship with the land, it is the one that, keeps us going. And so I always want to try to honor it in a way, but also share it so that it's that's beauty. And then obviously within the storyline, that destruction that has happened and is happening to it. And so always that character, that Mother Earth, the land is part of that. Is a character and is part of us.
You really start out in it's a stunning images. Is it a Google Earth shot? Is that what we see?
No, it's a beautiful drone shot done by Ryan Mariotti, one of our.
Oh wow!
It's a drone shot, and it's just the ice. It was an amazing time because it was spring, and so a lot of the snow had been blown off the ice, and so we just see all of this really structured, abstract. It's not structured. It's really abstract views of you don't really quite sure what it is, and then you start throughout the film you start seeing that it's just ice.
Yeah, you start to get a better sense for what. Well, I think one of the things I took away from that, and certainly the snow, the hiking, the trees, etc., the sky, the way the water. I mean, the way land is represented in the film and shot in the film. It's a reminder at how vast, how beautiful, and sort of terrifying almost at the same time it really is. This idea of getting lost, finding yourself in the woods. But wow, what I could just as easily get lost here.
Yeah, no, it is, and especially because we wanted the audience to understand that character, even though that she grew up in that land. And when she comes back to that land, she has to be familiar with it, get to know it again. And so, as she walks and as she comes back into the community, she still has that urban exterior on her, and she has this, the way she's dressed, and so it just starts slowly coming off her, the urban existence, and then she's coming back into that nature, and that's part of that thriller element of it is that you're not quite sure, like, is it something that is just in her mind,
right? And
is the land playing tricks on her, or is there something that's really coming for her?
The sounds in the woods, are they actually happening?
Yes, exactly. And that was really what was really beautiful, like the collaboration around sound and editing. And when we were shooting, we were always so conscious about the silence and letting those natural sounds come out. And sometimes you can shoot and everybody's like, oh, worry about sound later or something. But really, it was just like, let's try to get these moments, these really delicate, beautiful moments where she's connecting to the land, and so that the audience experiences that too. And so when Steve Monroe did the sound design, he's just brought in this beautiful, like, it's just so, there's so much breath within it, and it's so precise, and it's crafted so well that you experience that nature, that Mother Earth, that, that being on the land.
Isn't I think it's Tentu's character who at one point talks about the line that I wrote down was, and I'm not sure if I'm quoting it correctly, but letting me listen to all the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
this sense of there's this almost Buddhist-like meditative, very spiritual aspect to. I mean, there's something very spiritual to me about walking through the snow, frankly, right? I mean, there really is the crunch, the intention behind it. There's almost a ritual to it, and you could even really break it down and write a first-year philosophy paper on it. But can you talk a little bit about that? Listening to all the trees. That I mean, that's a beautiful notion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something that Tentu was also bringing with her her character is that return. Like she grew up within that north. She grew up in her own landscapes, but within that on the land and with the land, and respecting the earth in a way that to listen to it, and it'll tell you, what I mean. It'll give you those lessons, and it'll tell you if you're walking, the right way, or if you're living in that good way. And so I was born and raised in my community, and we spent a lot of time, and we still do, out hunting, gathering, and just being with each other in the communities, with the community, or just with family, or just with my mom and dad, and my sister. And so I've always had that essence of watching my father and how he walks the land, and just being able to and it can be quite frightening sometimes because if you're not familiar with it, or things do make noises that you're unfamiliar with, and so you're always having to be open and always having to be very grateful for what's around you.
So you talked earlier on when we started the conversation a little bit about some of the challenges, and you mentioned specifically funding. I found it interesting as I was kind of doing a little bit, looking at a couple of reviews post-TIFF and so on. So Tentu's been in over 100 films, but this was her first lead role, and you've said somewhere, you've talked a great deal about ownership and voice, and I mean this is very much a part of this film. On it's in your face in a way, but it's also very much a subtle undertone too. Is that one of the challenges that you were talking about as you tried to tell this story? Is that sort of woven into everything?
I think, yes, it is. And I think, the time is changing right now. It's an unbelievable time. And Alanis Abomswan talks about this too. It's like, it's a beautiful time for Indigenous filmmakers and Indigenous storytellers, Indigenous musicians, artists, to just be within their own perspective. And so once you're in that perspective and you're telling that story from that perspective, it's different.
Right.
There's truth within that. And so I think for a lot of people, it's a little bit unfamiliar because it's not necessarily a Western perspective. It's an Indigenous perspective. And so we tell stories sometimes differently. And especially each area, from their communities are all so different. And so, trying to keep that perspective and to really make sure that you're telling this story with truth and originality, and also that you're pushing, you feel like, you hope that you're pushing a boundary in a way so that something, when you're watching it, this is something new, or it's something that is worth watching, and that these stories are told, and that ceremony is part of that, and that there's always within that perspective, you're doing something, for me, it's like working with my community and trying to create something that is better for tomorrow.
Could a non-Indigenous voice have told, well, obviously they could have practically, I suppose, told the same story, but yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about voice, we're talking about representation, and I love our home on native land, the scene with the I guess around the mining and the police arriving in the SUV and all of that. It's a small piece of the film, but clearly has had a splash and ripple effect for many, many years. So anyway, I guess I'm really asking you a question, I suppose, about ownership and about oppression and so on, and wondered what your thoughts were as a storyteller, as a filmmaker.
Yeah, no, it's not to say that if a non-Indigenous person came in and did an Indigenous story, that's their choice to do it, and that perspective is always going to be from them. Once an Indigenous person tells that story, their story, it's their perspective. And so within that is that truth. And so me being able to tell the story that I want to from my community, within my community, all of those voices are part of that. And so they trust me, and I want to create the best opportunity for them to collaborate with me and come into that. And so those protest scenes, we had a young warrior there, Autumn Pelche, who's so beautiful, and she opens up that scene, asking people to really, warrior up and to really look at what's happening with the issues around water. And so those are the perspectives that we bring in when we're working from community, and that we're working from that those origins. And we have these shared stories, and we have this shared vision, and this shared struggle. And so that becomes different than somebody who's just coming into the community or having an outsider book.
Yeah, I guess it's not about so much as we don't want those voices. It needs to be way more inclusive, and way more holistic, way more comprehensive, right? I mean, I love shared story, shared vision, shared struggle. It's maybe that's the title of your autobiography, Darlene. What do you think?
Excellent.
Yeah,
I think it's written already.
I mean, there you go. So typically, somebody would probably watch a film like this, and I mean, unless you haven't been watching the news at all, but still, over the last few years, but still, the idea of arsenic in your water source, of a polluted water source, is kind of foreign, I suppose, to I would say most people in the West, right? I mean, this is isn't that how 2/3 of the world live? That's the majority world. That's what we often call a developing country, right? That's not Canada. Right. Can't be Canada. And I think there's still that bias, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that. But
I don't think Canada has awoken to the real issues around mining and the taking of the resources and the footprint that it leaves. And sometimes when you're living in an urban reality, you don't see what's happening outside of it. And so a lot of our waters, they are polluted from hundreds of years of resource taking. And specifically the story that's in the film is very close to home, because that's our story. There was a gold mine 100 years ago, left its tailings. I call it the white sands, and so those tailings are leaching into our lakes. And so each lake, and just over the years, there's a high mercury and arsenic. So there's all of these issues that are happening in every region, and just being aware of how long can we do this, and why are we doing this, at what cost, so that why are we taking resources still? It's such a ridiculous idea of why aren't we creating? There's so much brilliance around technology. Why are we not putting our money and our ideas into that, instead of just continuously taking from the land?
I love how how a great story, how a great film like yours touches on so many different issues, right? And so the film's about relationship. It's about love. It's about loyalty. It's about water and sanitation issues in northern Ontario. It's about, you know what I mean? Like, it's just
Yeah.
a great story allows us to step into somebody else's world, somebody else's life, and hopefully step out of it with a new understanding and a new perspective, and the ability to ask, I hope, better questions about I don't know, finding a way to share our stories in a better way.
Yeah.
Does that sound ridiculously corny to you, or is
No,
that?
no, 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 no. That's what we're doing, right? That's what we're
Yeah.
doing. I think, yeah. No, and just to allow the audiences to see that and
Hmm.
to challenge themselves and to challenge others to watch Indigenous filmmaking and stories, and just seeing how amazing they are, how funny they are, how what perspective it is, and how they're set within that Indigenous perspective.
Spe-
Those
speaking
stories from their home.
speaking of Indigenous perspectives and stories from home, can you talk a little bit about the Seven Grandfathers teachings? In the press kit, I've seen it elsewhere. I'd love to hear about how that became um, a first thing for you, or a part of framing this story, and love to hear too about where the story actually came from. I know it's been something going on with you, I guess, what do you say? You've been bouncing around in your head for about 10 years, something along those lines?
Hmm. So the seven grandfather teachings are just are values of how to live a good life, and to continuously think about how we work together, how we respect each other, and how we value one another.
Mm.
And so those teachings were part of that everyday protocols that were set within when we were making the film. And so those are our guides. And so we wanted to share that with the crew and the cast, so that every day we were not only really kind of, well, we were also just like within what's happening now, and has happened, you know what I mean, for so long, and continues to happen. Just respecting each other as human beings first, and finding a really healthy way of working together. Because when you think about the story comes from an idea of taking, and so
Right.
that ownership. And so here's this woman who has had an amazing career and decided to change her life, and that's her life, and that's what she wants. But yet something's always taking, something's always pulling her back, and because they think that they own her, or they think that
Right.
they own that. And especially that happens so much with artists, and you know what I mean, and star, and anybody who's acting, or anybody who's creating or putting things out into the world. Somebody will come in and try to take it or to own it. And so that's part of that story. And then it just paralleled with that idea around the mines, and what they've done all around the world to these corporations and these proponents, where it's just like taking because they think they own it. We don't own that land. We're just collectively living on it. And so, but there's always this value, this Victorian notion around property and value. And so it's always a continuous struggle when a community, doesn't, believes in one way, and then you have this world coming at you that is saying, but yet you must own, you must take, So it's those stories coming and crashing together in contemporary story.
Well, as I hear you talk about it, and it makes so much sense. I mean, aren't the opening scenes of the film basically last performance, packing up of the guitar, walking out of the theater, and it's kind of like, I'm done.
I'm done.
And then we see this harsh reaction from her, I guess her manager, or I guess it's her manager, or her agent, I suppose. And that all of a sudden that sense of ownership comes out, right?
Yes.
In a really visceral way. And then we see it teased out throughout. And so all of a sudden that becomes, I guess, the metaphor for, well, so many things, but also for her just kind of at this late stage in her life, finally kind of saying I'm done and I'm moving on, or I'm going to the next
Yeah.
phase. Oh, by the way, Darlene, I got to say, I so loved, I think it was near the beginning of the film, the envelope that comes in the mail. We won't say too much about it, I suppose, for storytelling purposes, and she just grabs it, throws it in the fire, and says something about there being no money in it. But I just love the intention and the commitment, because, well, what if there was money in there?
Exactly.
It's
Yeah,
just, it was just, it's a
and
love.
it's the brilliance of Tentu. Just she's
A-
so great at just delivering all. You know what I mean? Just like, oh, it's if there's no, there's no money.
Yeah,
And then Gail,
whatever,
reacting to it.
into the fire it goes. Yeah.
Into the fire. She knows the story already.
Is this about an awakening that comes late in life, or has this just been this ongoing sort of healing process through I don't know, can I say PTSD, or the trauma that she's experienced and the community
Yeah.
has experienced?
Well, I don't. I think it's a lot of things, and in a way, it's hard to say it's one thing or the other.
Right.
It is her coming to terms. I think when we deal with trauma, we just don't one day go, oh, it's over.
Right.
And it's just continuous. It's going to be lifelong. And so this is her next level of really trying to start a new life and to look at what can happen within those next years. And instead of sometimes when you're on the road, you're not really always you're not always in, the realities that everybody else is in. And so this is her trying something different, wanting something different, and letting go of some of, that trauma and dealing with it.
Well, and about being a survivor, about
and being a survivor,
doing just going to say doing what it takes to step into her future.
Exactly. And a lot of times, we want to see these stories that are that are on the nose about a certain, something. But we know, the way I took this story was that the way Tentu and the way the character Mary, the way she walks onto the stage, the way she walks in the bush, the way she just deals with everything, that she has had a past.
Oh,
we don't necessarily 100%. Need to know that.
Well, it really
exactly.
You don't exactly need to know, and I would imagine I wouldn't be surprised if I can say this, that some people will probably criticize you for that, maybe as a story. I didn't have enough detail, but frankly, I mean, isn't that the mystery of us all? Why would you ever assume or presuppose, even somebody you're married to, that you've got it all, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we're complex, right?
Exactly, and that's what we purposely did that. We purposely didn't talk about residential schools in that way, because when she's walking, those histories. The reason that they're all speaking English, you know what I mean? There's a reason that they're speaking English. There's a reason that, her grandmother's, you know what I mean, has a, camp out in the bush. There's a reason why the granddaughter is living with, her sister. There's all of these reasons, and, from the histories. And so we don't need to we don't have to tell you those things. You just have to experience it with them, because they're living it. Now you're living it as a viewer.
Why, and maybe I'm going to just tip my own sort of ignorance here, but birch bark. I mean, birch trees are clearly evident. I mean, beautiful shots and the peeling of the birch bark and her name. What's going on with the birch tree? Other than the fact that it's hardwood. And I remember, believe it or not, as a kid being at a camp and writing a letter to my mom and dad on birch bark and mailing it back home. Yeah.
Yeah, birch barks are there's medicine within the birch trees. There's, they hold the properties of, where, that birch can, create canoes and can create bowls. It can create scrolls, those letters home, those letters, those scrolls that were done anciently. So, or, you know, in the times, and, you know, we're a lot getting back into that. And so birch trees are beautiful, and that's what's around in my landscape, and that's what we grew up around: birch, cedar, pines, poplars, but those birch trees are beautiful and they're gorgeous, and so there's so much within that tree. Yeah. So
well, and we're kind of back to listening to the trees in a very specific and particular way. Mm-hmm. And the red ribbons and the one white one, we don't need to talk about it, but fascinating still. Just raise it for sure. Maybe answers a couple, but raises some other questions. One of my a couple favorite lines in the film. I just, sadly, we're coming close to the end of our conversation here. But enjoy the love while you got it. Never mind the noise. Mm-hmm. It's got to be one of my faves. And then awesome. I remember something about I still know how to swing an axe. Is that another line?
Yes, I still know how to swing an axe. Yeah. Yeah, and I think what I loved being able to just and everybody really enjoyed it. It was like these the scene in the Chinese restaurant where they're going on a date. It's just like it's really beautiful. Like and why not see an older woman and an older Native woman, in her full beauty, right, going out on dates. You know what I mean? I can still swing an axe. She still got it. And have a lover and be sensual and be sexual, and have that within on that page and in that screen, because that's what we see every day. And so why not enjoy that beauty and share that beauty of love and sensuality and sexuality.
And that's Albert, right? That she was out on the date with?
Yes.
Yeah,
Albert, yeah.
Wonderful. I mean, just what a performance too, right? I mean, just what a
Johnny's, yeah.
The voice alone. There was healing in the voice alone, as far as I'm concerned. His voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
So what's next for Falls Around Her? You got this bit of this tour. You're off and running basically for the next little while.
Yes. We're still doing a lot of the international and U.S.
Yep.
Tours or festivals, and so then we have this Canadian theatrical release, which we're very excited about. We started in Calgary. We'll be in Toronto next week, and then we go up to Sudbury. We have Winnipeg. We have Victoria, Vancouver, and then there's some other smaller ones that I'm forgetting right now. But we'll be keep posting them on our Instagrams, and Pacific Northwest Pictures is with us, our Canadian distributor. So they're doing an amazing job just getting the film out and getting it to
so cool.
to all of these places. Yeah,
and
then we're also, trying to really contribute to the idea of trying to get into as many Indigenous communities as we can. So, and within that, and then it will have its will play on the platforms, and then CBC like Crave and TMN, I believe it is.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Well done. Yeah.
I'm getting this all correct. And then CBC, and then iTunes, and the trailer's up on iTunes right now. Yeah. No,
that's fantastic.
It's a real. Yeah. I always just say, I feel like a little res girl who's just is so grateful and thankful to be able to travel the world, make films, and still be within the community.
So let's maybe sort of the final question, but I'm looking forward to meeting you and continuing this at another time for sure. But Darlene, fast forward 5, 7, 10 years, you meet a young woman, let's say a high school student, maybe younger, could be my daughter. She's 11, Victoria. She hands you a small essay that she's written. You flip through a few pages. She's seen your film, clearly. She's written a paper about it. What's the paper about? Any ideas?
Oh my God! I hope it's land and community.
Land and community. Nice.
Yes. Yeah.
And reconciliation, does that make it in there?
Well, I think, yeah, let's hope.
Let's hope.
Let's hope
That's
there is
right.
reconciliation.
Well, you know what's interesting about that to me is I love how you say land and community, period, because there reconciliation and community and healing built within that.
It is, yeah.
Right? Isn't that kind of falls around her, right?
It is, yeah.
Or the message.
And it is. And, Tantu reminded me of this. And it's just like, it was so amazing to, oh, hello?
Yep, I'm with you.
Oh, okay. Oh, actually, my phone's going to die soon. Okay, so.
Someone else has joined our call, yeah.
Yeah, it's just that Tantu has, she just, reminded me that there was so much love while we made it. There was so much love, laughter. You know what I mean? We all came together and we created this. It was a really difficult shoot. It was a really low budget, but we all just kept going because we, loved working with each other and we loved the story. And the community was with us. And so that's really part of, there's one thing of putting out a film and giving it and sharing it, but also that part of making it is so beautiful. And so that love of being able to, at this time, to come together as Indigenous people to create is just beautiful.
Yeah, that's so amazing, and what a beautiful and lovely spot to end with. Well, as far as I'm concerned, you've made a beautiful, thoughtful, and important film, and again, I really do hope everyone sees it, and so much more to talk about. Darlene, I always get a little frustrated with my interviews because they're never quite long enough. I feel like when I'm wrapping them up, we're just getting started. What do you mean we've got This is ridiculous. So clearly we're going to have to do a part 2 down the road, and I wish you all the success with the film, and again, congratulations. We've been talking to Darlene Naponse today here on Face to Face about her new film, Falls Around Her. Look for it soon. Maybe coming soon to a theater near you, but definitely on your TV screen or whatever your screen of choice, I guess. Darlene, thanks for your time today.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you.